Hey everybody, it's Scott Shetler here at Extreme Performance Training Systems, and welcome to this week's episode of Strength and Health TV. Today we're going to give you a little break from having me sit here talking at you for the entire episode, and I got my friend Chris in today, so I'm pretty psyched. We're going to do this little interview style format. Chris is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and he's been doing his strength training here with me. Actually did a little bit of work a couple years ago, and just got him back in the gym the last couple of months, so I kind of wanted to dig into that. So Chris, thanks for being here, brother. I really appreciate it. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background.
Okay, so my name's Chris Jones. I've been training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for just over 5 years now. I had a background in wrestling. I grappled a little bit in the Marine Corps, and that's about the extent of my experience goes.
So when did you start wrestling? Were you like Pee-wee wrestling, and then worked your way up, middle school, high school?
So I started in high school, wrestled all 4 years, did spring and summer. So during the summers, actually, freestyle wrestling, which is a little bit more fluid based, which is great, which kind of helps out with jiu-jitsu. And it's not just as linear as folk style is.
Yeah. Cool. Did a little grappling or wrestling in the Corps too?
Yes. So the Marine Corps martial arts program was also started with some of the Gracies coming in and helping with the combatives course of it. So there's very basics of jiu-jitsu, judo, some Western boxing, of that sort. But it wasn't until I'd gotten out of the Marine Corps and found Paul Creighton, which is the gym that I attend, and really fell in love with the sport.
So was that like the your hand-to-hand combat training things that you guys would do? Was like personal combative type stuff?
Yes, all close quarter combat.
Okay.
Basically, all when literally the crap hits the fan and you don't have your weapon and somebody's literally on top of you. It's what you can do to subdue them, to either get a weapon of opportunity or take them out with your hands.
Cool. I didn't realize they had the Gracies in there doing that. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool. So, like you just mentioned, you're training up at Paul Creighton's place up in Suwanee, Georgia, down here. You've been there for how long?
5 years.
5 years?
Yes.
And so when I first met you, that was back in, I think, like 2012. I'd been working with one of your old teammates at the time, and you would just gotten your blue belt, or you'd been a blue belt for a little while and just getting ready to start competing. Was that it?
Yes, I just got my blue belt probably about 3 months prior to that.
Okay, yeah, so we did a little bit of conditioning work, some energy systems work back then, and was that your first, because we were getting ready for the, was it the Lutadors that was down here?
Yes, Lutador, and then the IBJJF Worlds.
Okay. And that was, this was pretty amazing because he goes to the Lutadors, and you won gold in your division, which was blue belt 205 weight class?
200, yeah, 205.
Around there. And then, so you won gold, but you did it so you had 6 matches that day, I think, and you did it 100% submission, right? You submitted everybody, which is pretty damn awesome, man. That's pretty crazy. So you did that, and then we hadn't seen each other in a couple of years, and you continue your brown belt now, so you've been kind of working your way up through the ranks and stuff. Were you competitive that whole time? I mean, did you pretty regularly do competitions every year?
Oh, yes. So I would do all the local tournaments, the Nagas, the New Breeds. I would do the IBJJF International Jiu-Jitsu Federation whenever they would come to Atlanta. But then I would also travel to California or Vegas and do the Pan American Championships and the World Championships. As a blue belt, shortly after I trained with you, I went out and competed in that, and I took second place in my first year as a blue belt, first time ever doing anything like that.
Was that at Pans or was that at Worlds?
That was at no, that was at Worlds.
Okay.
And then, so as a few years later, I went out and did purple belt Pan Americans, and I ended up winning that.
Nice.
in my age division, and then I believe it was the following year, which was this past year, I'd gone back out and I took second place as a purple belt in the Worlds. So, and then third place in the absolute division of that.
Cool.
So it's been an up and down roller coaster as far as tournaments. I've done a couple of here local ones where I've gotten the opportunity to face some black belts and no gi stuff, because when you wear the gi, you keep your belt on and you do all your rank based.
Yeah.
And then usually the smaller tournaments around here, they'll just put everybody together and say who's the best.
Yeah.
And so no-gi format's a lot more wrestling based, and whatever submission you can come up with is what you get.
What format do you prefer, or I mean, do you have a favorite gi, no gi? I mean, what do you like the best?
As far as favorite, I probably lean more towards the gi, just because there's so many more opportunities of submissions that you can acquire with it, and it's one of those that the movements will never end. Like, you can come up with moves constantly. In wrestling, pretty much it's been around since the dawn of combative sports. So
for sure.
Everything's been figured out in wrestling, and rule sets are made, and so you can't progress wrestling any more than pretty much it already has. But as far as jiu-jitsu, it's been only around for a little over 100 years, so it's still evolving. And as the rule sets change, it's going to get a little bit different, but it's going into the way that it's staying more towards the realistic aspect of what you can do against somebody out in the streets. So you have clothing and they have clothing, so how can you use their clothing against them, which is great.
And that's where I guess probably one of the, I don't want to say disadvantage, but that's probably brings a whole different element when you're doing the no-gi, because obviously you don't have that material to grab onto and things like that. So I mean, how much of because I remember going to I think it was a Grappler's Quest that Jason did, back in, I think it was like 2011, and I watched his no-gi series, then I watched his gi, because he did both that day, and this guy that he just, I want to say dominated, but beat pretty easily in no-gi, then they get to the gi division, and this guy just handled Jason couldn't do anything, Yes. So I mean, obviously there was some differences there. I thought maybe like, talking to Jason when he did the no-gi, obviously I think his technique in jiu-jitsu was a lot better than this guy, because this guy was significantly bigger, and stronger than Jason was, but Jason had better technique. And then when they got into the gi, it just seemed like this guy just clamped onto Jason. Jason really couldn't do much, and he said he just couldn't overpower the guy. This guy had a really significant strength and in those holds and stuff like that, and that then, he eventually dropped some weight and got into a lighter weight class and stuff like that. So I know each one presents its own challenge and its own advantages and disadvantages and stuff. So, I think that's a good tie into, this is kind of big debate. It's not just with jiu-jitsu, it's not just wrestling, but I think all sports. How big of an impact do you feel, now we're not talking about technique right now, right? How big of an impact do you feel general physical preparedness, strength, power, speed, mobility, these general physical qualities, how big of an impact do you think that has on competitive jiu-jitsu, or even somebody who's just pursuing jiu-jitsu recreationally?
It has a great impact on it. So we've got people who don't really compete at all, and they're strong and athletic, and they do really good in the gym. And then we've got people who want to compete, but they just don't have the strength and speed out there yet. So whenever they face each other, one has great technique, but he doesn't have the overall athleticism as the guy who never competes, but he's really super strong and doesn't have as much technique. So whenever those two face off, it's a back and forth battle as to who's going to be more dominant. It just all depends on the day and the time and what's going on. But clearly, if the guy that's strong and has a little bit more technique is going to supersede anybody else who just has a lack of conditioning, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, when we say, strength, I think a lot of people get, kind of paranoid, especially a lot of the old school people, because they immediately conjure up some image of like a world's strongest man competitor or a super heavyweight power lifter or something like that. And that's certainly not the goal with the type of strength you're trying to build, or even, the athletes and stuff that train here. And, I've gotten into, I don't want to really say arguments, I guess debate would be a better word. Strain, we're not trying to make our fighters power lifters. We're not, John Jones actually came under fire recently, because he'd been doing a lot of squatting and deadlifting, more powerlifting based movements.
Yes.
And some people were very critical of that, and saying that kind of led to his, poor performance, and it's really inhibiting and things like that. And, I disagree, because the stuff that we're having you do, there may be some movements that may be, powerlifting related. You do a deadlift. powerlifting is a competitive sport. You're competing in this squat dimension and deadlift. You do a deadlift for, specific reasons and stuff like that, but you're in here oftentimes training with some of our powerlifters, and you're doing a completely different, different training program. There's, aside from a couple of the key movements and stuff like that, but the things that we've done with you, and I think what any good strength and conditioning coach or physical performance coach is going to do with any athlete is get into your sport, look at the physical demands, the physical requirements, see how you stack up where you're at right now with those needs of the sport, and then, find out where you're lacking and then start trying to build that up. Do you need a little bit more strength? Do you need more power? Do you need more endurance, your cardio and things like that? So I think it's, and what we've tried to do with you is we evaluate, we kind of look at where you're at, you check, you got any injuries, are you nursing anything right now, is your back weak, things like that. And then we try to build the program around that, and keep it within the confines of the physical abilities that we're trying to develop. And with you, it's a lot of maximal power, which we incorporate jumps and, some throws and things like, med ball work and stuff like that. It's absolute strength where we're lifting, very heavy weights. But I mean, we don't spend 5% of the time doing that, 10% of the time, very little. You've ground out some pretty heavy lifts in the past, but then we have this kind of intermediate area where we're looking at qualities like explosive strength, strength, speed, and then just trying to focus on training economy where we're doing exercises with kind of a conditioning effect, and I think about things that we do with like the sled pulling, with the belt squat, where we'll get you strapped up to a certain amount of weight in the belt squat, and we might have you do exercises like med ball throws and stuff while you're walking against that load. So I think the stuff that we've done, we've done a pretty good job at taking the physical qualities of your sport and really trying to focus on those in the training.
Definitely.
And it's not like you're in here, twice a week. You got a couple of body weight workouts that we have you do on here, and a little bit of cardiac development work. And I mean, it's really a small amount of time when you look at your overall training schedule. So why don't you talk a little bit about your training schedule, maybe go through a week, Monday to Sunday, because I know, you got a family, you're working full time, I mean, it's not like you're making millions of dollars doing jiu-jitsu. I mean, you're really paying to do this sport, so it's definitely a passion for you. So walk us through, kind of what a normal week looks like for you training wise.
So a normal week for me would be Sunday through Saturday, and Sundays I actually work on Sunday morning, so I'll go to work, and then while I'm working I can get a break and I'll come up here and do my training with you, and then once on my way home I'll stop at the gym, and we'll get about maybe 4 to 5 guys come in, and we'll get a training session in, a quick little group like that. And then Monday, go to work, leave, come home, and then I get my kids to their practices, and then I come back to the gym and I teach a class at 5:45 that I'll also participate and roll in, and then I'll also do a cardiac workout that you help prepare. Tuesday's the same rotation, except for that afternoon I'll end up doing some treadmill work where I'm doing 45 minutes of cardio, and then I'll actually train right after that so I can keep my energy levels, or I try to burn myself down, and then you have to use nothing but technique while I'm training in class. So
you're purposely, that's interesting, you're purposely fatiguing yourself to a certain extent.
Yes. So
that your cardio is affected, your wind's affected and stuff like that, so you can't rely on some of those physical attributes that you might have going in fresh to a match or a training session. And then that's awesome. Cool.
And then we'll train, and that's about an hour and a half of training. And then Wednesday, work, come home, teach class, and then I'll actually roll in that again, and I'll do some more the cardio development work there. And then Thursday, same work, come back, and then I'll get back on the treadmill, and then class again that night right afterwards, and that's another hour and a half worth of rolling. Friday, I'll go to the chiropractor, try to get my adjustments done and all that, come up here, get my power training session in, and then I'll go back and train again that night. And then Saturday morning, wake up, go train.
So yeah, it's really, I mean, it's full time, man. I mean, every minute you're either, fulfilling your family or your work responsibilities, and then it's the rest of the time it's just gym.
Well, it's a passion.
Yeah.
So Anytime you're passionate about something, if you don't put your effort into it, then it never develops into anything further. Well, you couldn't even really call it a passion if you're not putting your all into it.
Yeah.
So it's a sport that I love. I used to consider myself a wrestler. When I started jiu-jitsu, I was like, I'm a wrestler. And then after a year or so after that, I was like, no, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I love
All
jiu-jitsu.
Very cool. So you just had a pretty big match down here in Atlanta. Well, actually up here in Gwinnett in Duluth. And that was done by the Fight to Win promotion.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about that, because I actually got to go to this, and I've been to a lot of jiu-jitsu matches in the past. And typically, your normal jiu-jitsu match is going to be multiple rings, a lot of stuff going on at the same time. A little bit kind of like a high school wrestling match, right? I mean, it's not. Whereas this was in the Infinite Energy Center over there, so you got a big stage. It's one big elevated platform. You got lights. You got this ramp that all the grapplers are walking out on. There's music, and it was definitely a different environment, different atmosphere that it seems like this promotion's trying to create. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, because that was a really cool event.
Yeah, so it was a great event. Atlanta is really a hotbed for jiu-jitsu. We've got some of the best coaches down here. It's just not many shows come to Georgia just because everything's in LA or New York and stuff like that. So we got the chance of this Fight to Win promotions coming down, and you submit yourself and they'll review who's going to be in it, and they'll actually make matches up in pairs just like an MMA fight. So you'll meet at a weight class, you'll do a weigh-in, do all the pictures, and like I said, they'll elevated platform, lights, music. It's just like an MMA venue. So it was something that was pretty awesome, and we ended up having like one of the best shows. That I guess it was streamed live over the internet, and then of course immediately uploaded to YouTube. That's the way things go. And I can't remember the match who it was, but there was two black belts that competed against each other, and it was like one of the highest viewings that they had ever received.
Really?
So hopefully something like that actually attracts more people to come to Georgia, because we've got a lot of talent in this state, so it's great.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, as the spectator, that venue's really cool because, everybody loves MMA. Everybody watches UFC and things like that. And with that format, it brings a little bit more excitement, for the crowd, for maybe like, it seems like when you go to the big tournaments, that's really kind of, it's more about the sport, it's more about the competitors and, the family or whatever, the competitors that go, it's kind of like wrestling in that regard. Whereas this, with the way that they kind of highlight the grapplers as they're coming out, everything they got on the screen, it makes it a little bit more spectator friendly, I think, is a word that I'm trying to find. And I mean, it seems to me like that can be great for the sport of jiu-jitsu as far as getting maybe the message of the sport out there, because I know you and I've talked about this a little bit, and one of my hang-ups with the UFC and kind of MMA, and I love the sport. I mean, there's nothing more pure than two people getting into the cage, throwing it all out there, and one of them's going to lose. I mean, that's the ultimate. It's not like football where you got two teams going against each other and it's a team thing. This is all on your shoulders. You got your team, your preparation, all that stuff. But a minute that cage door shuts, it's you and your opponent, and one of you guys is going to get beat. And I have all the respect in the world for anybody that does that. But one of the things that you see with the commercialization of MMA and things like that is you're getting away from some of the traditional aspects of the martial arts, I feel anyway. And I know we've talked about this a little bit, and I think that's one of the important things that you get is almost like this value system. There's a history behind each of the martial arts and things like that, and a lineage and almost like a heritage. As it's the techniques are being passed to you from your instructor, from their instructor. So I hate to see kind of the respect for the traditional aspects of the martial arts going away. And I think that's one of the downsides that, if I'm a 10-year-old kid, I can walk into an MMA gym now. And yeah, granted, I'm going to learn a lot of great practical skill and stuff like that, but I might never learn that other side of the martial arts. And I'd really hate to see 20, 30 years from now that stuff starts going more and more by the wayside, where the sport aspect just totally takes over. So I think, where you take a pure sport like jiu-jitsu, and you get it out there in this type of format, it might highlight that, for these spectators and stuff like that. And be a little bit more educational, because one of the biggest complaints that you hear about with MMA now is when they go to the ground, people just start booing. Nobody understands the ground game, and I think something like this can really help take the average person and give them a better appreciation for what you guys do, because it's like the ultimate physical chess match.
Yes, and they also made it a really great way to. So instead of the normal tournament mode where you get 2 points for a takedown, or if you're mounted on top of the person, you get 4 points. There's no points at all. So whoever is the most dominant person in that match, they've got 3 judges. If there's no finish or submission at all, those 3 judges will get on the mat, and whoever they felt showed either like the most technique, control, or overall just showmanship of it, they're going to award that the winner. So instead of it just being an ongoing battle like the Gracie challenges used to have, like with 2 guys would come in and they'd be fighting for an hour till somebody somebody wins. Yeah. It's got to get to a point where there's going to be an end game. So that's a good way to have an end game. They got 3 different guys having their own view and opinion of what happened out there, and there's not just one person who says, okay, well, he gets an advantage because I think he almost got a sweep, or something silly like that. So it's throw it out there, do what you want to do, and at the end of it, whoever was the better man wins.
And that's a little different from like a regular match and stuff where you are gaining points. And like you were telling me the one day, there's certain things that people have adopted because it's not just about the technique at that point, it's about getting points. So people will do things that might not be characteristic of the art itself because it's giving them an advantage, because ultimately you're trying to win. Yes. So if you could do something to gain points and gain an advantage, it changes a little bit, right? I mean, it's not I don't want to say it takes away from but it almost evolves into something different. It's like now you're trying to score points, whereas this, it really is more about using your well-rounded skill set and stuff that you're building through training the art and stuff like that.
Yes.
And so with this, you mentioned the judges and stuff like that. I saw 3 flags go up for you, so you won pretty decisively and ended up getting a brown belt fight of the night.
Yes, it ended up being the fight of the night for the brown belts. Yes.
So talk a little about that fight, because this was kind of unique. I mean, I jump online the day of, and I see that your opponent's not showing up, and I'm like, oh, what the hell, man? What's going on? Has Chris got a match or not? And I texted you and you said, yeah, everything's on, and it turned out, I almost feel like what I'd seen from this guy, and I don't want to get into a trash talking thing here, but I think it's very disrespectful when you commit to doing an event, especially something of this nature, for you not to do everything in your power to get there and to use some excuse why you didn't show up. I think it's very disrespectful to your opponent, to the sport, to the promotion and stuff like that. But you had a couple guys who literally just stepped up and said, hey, that's BS, I'll fill in if they... And these guys had matches that day too, right?
Oh yeah, so it was Jake Joe and Ryan Haggerty. They both agreed. There was a couple of other guys that agreed they'd step up too. Just all depends on how things went. But both of those guys stepped up and said, hey, the winner of our match, we'll face them no matter what. No matter what happens, whoever wins, we'll step up and we'll go again. So those 2 ended up going first that night, and Ryan ended up winning. And then he got a nice, I guess about 5 matches in between our match break before it. So very, very big props to Ryan for stepping up.
Yeah, that was very cool. And just in talking to you, and some of the problems that you had with him on the mat, as far as him as an opponent, it almost seems like you ended up with what could have potentially been a stronger opponent anyway. So it seems like it might have been a better challenge for you, possibly.
Well, it's all decisive. Like, that's the great thing about jiu-jitsu. People have different styles and skill sets and stuff like that. So it sometimes having a bigger person is kind of better, because that's what jiu-jitsu is actually made for a littler man to actually be able to succumb a bigger person, larger person that's trying to overtake them. So,
and that's the technique of the sport. That's what
it's all about technique.
Sure. So let's see. So we wrapped up this year. You did that thing that the Ultimate Grappler down in Florida. You did pretty well in that. Then we go into the fight to win. What do you got on the cards now? Anything coming up soon?
The Atlanta Open, which is going to be the February 4th. I'm going to be gearing up for that. So I'll be training hard this month, and then towards the end of the month, I'm going to be going up to New York and try to do some cross training at Renzo Gracie with John Danaher and Matt Serra's camp up there a little bit. So that'll be a good time for that.
And now that's your lineage, right? Because
Yes.
Paul Creighton, your teacher, is a student of Renzo's. He got his black belt from
He's a
Renzo.
black belt, Renzo Gracie, and he trained at the same time with Matt Serra and John Danaher and all those guys in New York.
It's a good club to be
Yes.
part of, man. That's for sure. So let's talk a little bit about your training now. So you went through your training schedule and stuff like that, and I know we kind of touched on a little bit of the stuff that we do in here. How big of an impact? And I know this stuff is not like something you just notice like night and day, but going into some of the more unique things that we've been able to incorporate here, things like all the work in the belt squat, the sled pulling. The gi work that we do where you're doing your pulls and stuff, the things that we do for training economy. How big of an impact the stuff we've done to build the hips, how big of an impact do you see that stuff like carrying over to your sport? I mean, do you think this stuff, there's definitely a correlation between this type of training and what you're doing? I mean, is it something you'd recommend to other?
Oh yeah. So before I relied a lot on technique. I've always been a bigger, stronger guy. So strength has been okay, but constant use and repetitive movement like that, you start burning yourself out, gassing yourself out quicker, so you don't have the strength or the speed anymore. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing max or not max sets, but more repetitions and lighter weights and stuff like that. So you're conditioning your body to burn more and be able to hit harder and faster every single time. Has been great as far as whenever I'm doing these knee cut passes where I'm cutting across the body, so I'm blowing and driving my hips through the person, and whenever I'm trying to turn somebody's leg, do leg drags and stuff like that, so I'm using a lot of back and shoulders, and it's all core strength. And so we've done a lot of core strength that is greatly, I feel, improved my jiu-jitsu, because my technique's there and I've always had, like I said, strength, but once you can actually have more explosive power along with that strength, it's been great.
Cool. Yeah, and just to, some of the things that we don't really have, I don't really write anything down, I mean, I don't like to say, okay, Chris is coming in on Friday and Sunday, we're going to do A, B, C, D, and E. I'll ask you a couple questions before we get started. Mainly we're watching those elbows and stuff. You got a little tendonitis or whatever. But I just kind of feel out how you are that day. If you're a little run down, a couple times we've had to pull back just a little bit, and then we taper going into your competition and stuff like that. But I really, I try to focus on everything in one session. And when I say that, it's multiple skills, multiple abilities, because I don't like this, okay, we're going to take a month and we're just going to work on maximal strength. Then we're going to take a month and work on power. Then we're going to take a month and work on conditioning, because that stuff just doesn't carry over block to block to block. I like to look at, I got you in 2 times this week, so I want to do things that we're going to do to build specific energy systems that you're going to use. And that's why one of the things that we know going into your contest, are you just going to compete, in one match that night? Is it going to be 7 minutes long? Is it going to be a tournament where you might have to go, 6 or 7 minutes on, 6 or 7 minutes off, 6 or 7 minutes on, 6 or 7 minutes off? And you know how tough that can be after a few, matches, as far as your endurance and stuff like that. So we kind of have to know what we're gearing up for, but then we try to we don't just do strength training, but we try to incorporate a lot of this stuff to mimic those energy systems. Right before his your last contest, we did that big 7-minute walk in the belt squat, which
brutal.
is incredibly brutal.
Brutal.
But, and that's, here we're taking a general developmental exercise, and we're making it as freaking tough on you as we can. All that weight pulling down on your hips, you got the upper body engaged, your heart's being, called upon just like it's going to be, hopefully worse than it's going to be, than you get on the mat. So I think, with this type of training, and then having that maximal strength work, the maximal power work and stuff like that, is there any carryover to the psychological aspect? Like, do you feel like does it give you a bit of a mental edge walking out onto the mat? You feel, I'm stronger, I'm more conditioned, I've got more tools in my toolbox than my guy has. I mean, does it give you any, other than the physical development, do you gain any advantage from that type of stuff?
Yes, in a way. I feel that I realize that I've been beating my butt up trying to get this right and pushing myself hard as I can, and I'm exerting everything I can before I come out there and face somebody. So that way I know whenever I'm out there on the mat, I'm like, this is my time. I've done it all back there. Everything is led up to this one moment. There's nothing that I'm going to go through that's any tougher than what I've done before.
Cool.
So
awesome, man. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap it up. So, I think definitely, just kind of talking about that, you're definitely one of the most dedicated athletes that we got in here, and you're certainly, you're juggling a lot of things at the same time, so it's awesome to see that level of dedication. As an athlete, as a competitor, as a traditional martial artist, is very cool. It's a total honor for me to get to work with you. If anybody, are you active on social media at all, or is there, I know you do some stuff for Day by Day. Why don't you go ahead and plug whoever you want to plug and tell people if they want to check you out on social media, where to go?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram as 007 _ Jonesy, and then you can find me on Facebook just as Chris Jones. Day by Day gives me some awesome gear that I work with. They've got great gis and shirts and no gi stuff and rash guards. I go to Optimum Health and Rehab. They help me out with my back and my shoulders and try to get my knees and my elbows feeling right before any competitions. And then you, of course. It's been great getting in here and getting my strength training in.
Cool, man. Well, it's certainly a pleasure to work with you. I'll definitely put all your links, to your social media, to your sponsors and things like that. And of course, big shout out to Creighton MMA. We'll definitely put their link down in the notes so people can check out Paul's place. And hopefully, if you're looking to do jiu-jitsu here in the North Atlanta area, definitely go check Chris out. Check out Creighton's. It's a great school. I've worked with a couple people from there, and you guys got some good things going on up there. And I think it's about time to go hit the iron, man. What do you say?
Ready for it.
All right, thanks a lot, brother. Really appreciate it.